The Gateway Board of School Directors Study Session Meeting, Tuesday, October 14th, 2018. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Bonnie, can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Bova.
Here.
Mrs. Cerrucci.
Here.
Mr. Gottman.
Here.
Dr. Kalkstein.
Here.
Mr. Lapsevich.
Here.
Mr. McIntyre.
Here.
Mr. Ritter.
Here.
Mrs. Warning.
Here.
Mr. Williams.
Here. Comments from residents on agenda items. I have a couple signed up. First one would be Mr. Tom LaBeouf.
He thinks I'm tall. I'm not.
Please just state your name and address for the record.
My name is Tom LaBeouf, or Thomas LaBeouf if you like, and I live on 1255 Holy Cross Drive in Monroeville.
Thank you.
Is that all you need?
That's it. You're up.
Okay. Good evening, and Dr. Short, the rest of the school board. I won't bother to try to go down and name everybody else, but I appreciate the opportunity to talk. Thank you for your willingness to reevaluate the current eligibility policy, and I'd like to make a couple of comments about that. Thank you for the opportunity to speak and for your willingness to listen to some input from some teachers, from some coaches in addressing this issue, something that didn't happen when it was put in. And I do hope that you'll have the courage to take it a step further and be positive agents for some change. I have to admit, as I was thinking a little bit about what to say tonight, I was just trying to figure a way to get your attention so that you wouldn't just be like some of my athletes or some of my former students and just kind of phase out as I talked. Because right now, some of you are probably thinking this is just another coach trying to figure out a way to get more kids eligible. And that's really not what this is about. It really isn't. I've never been in favor of this policy. Some of you know me, some of you don't. So I'm going to start by actually introducing myself a little bit to you. I taught here for almost 40 years in the English department at the high school. I've been coaching just as long. I've been coaching since I retired. I still miss teaching. It was my passion. And as I come before you this evening, it's not really about being a coach. It's about being an educator and about doing the things that are right for the kids. As I said, some of you think probably I'm just trying to figure a way to get some of the kids eligible or keep them eligible so that our program will do better. I've never been about program. The sports teams that I've coached have been very successful, but it has little to do with anything other than the fact that I'm passionate about the things that I do. And the kids that come know that they're going to work hard and that they're probably going to be successful, but it has little to do with me. If you asked me wins and losses, I really have no concern with that. I had to tabulate that when they asked me to do that a while back. I'm really here primarily as a teacher and as an educator. As I said, I taught here for about 40-odd years, almost 40 years, and my reputation here at that time was as a teacher as much as a coach. I would introduce myself every year at the beginning of the year to my students and remind them that I was first and foremost a teacher and secondarily a coach, and that they could expect me to spend most of my time teaching, not simply worrying about what was going on after school. My standards have always been high. I taught at every level, from the remedial levels to the general levels to the academic levels, and I know some of that's disappeared. And with the honors classes and the AP in the last 10 years or so, we're primarily with academic sophomores and with the honors seniors and with the AP seniors, and I'm really proud about some of the things that those kids accomplished. Those kids knew they had to work. It didn't matter whether they were at the remedial level or at the AP level. They had to work. They had to earn what they got. So this is not really about lowering standards. It's the furthest thing from the truth. It's about giving kids opportunities to succeed, and to succeed some places where they can't and some others along the way. As I said, I took great joy in helping students to develop their abilities to think, to speak, to write, to read, and gain an appreciation for the thoughts and writings of other people. But I took that same passion and joy to coaching. I always have. I coached cross country and track from the first year I was here. And then I coached junior high wrestling for 35 years as well. So not just at the high school level. I've always looked at all extracurricular activities, not just sports, but all extracurricular activities as another means of connecting with kids to help them develop into adults who would have a positive impact on their society, who would be good workers, good parents, good citizens, who could think and act independently while working cooperatively with others towards common goals. The reality is that sports and other extracurricular activities help us teachers and coaches connect with kids we could not reach in the classroom. And I saw that from the very beginning. I knew that as a student, but I knew that I could get the kids on the athletic field that I could not get to in the classroom. And then that would connect. Because some of those kids I connected to on the athletic field then had more motivation to stay eligible. I don't even remember when this policy was first put into effect. I just know that from my experience as a coach, I've watched our numbers drop, and many of it has to do with kids who gave up trying to stay eligible under the current policy. Not because they weren't trying, but they just couldn't do it. I know that we could look at stats and statistics, but look, if you're an average student and you're doing the best that you can, and the best that you can do is average, and I know that none of us want to think of our kids as average. Most people are average. My guess is that most of you in this room are somewhere average. I know I looked at myself as an average athlete. And I was pretty successful because I worked my tail off, but I was an average athlete. We fall into that category. But under the current system, if you're average and then you have a bad stretch, it's almost impossible to dig yourself out of the hole. And we've seen kids do it. There's no doubt we've done it. But I would look at the first 15, 20 years that I coached and watch kids who ended up being very, very successful at the college level academically, but who were really struggling here. They would never have survived under our current academic policy. And believe me, as a coach, I worked hard to try to make sure that the kids stressed academics first. I tell them that every year. You're struggling in the classroom, you do what it takes to get those grades up. You stay after school if necessary. You come late to practice, that's okay, get a signature. You show up late, we'll figure it out. But you take care of your academics. Not just so you can stay eligible, but that's the most important thing. Family, academics, sports, got to be that order. But some of these kids, there were probably half a dozen last year who were just under the 2.0. They could not get themselves eligible. A couple of those kids had just moved in. We'd like to think that everybody's on the same playing field. They're not. Some of our kids are really, really gifted academically. They don't even have to work to get good grades. I can look back at my high school career and I could say I fell into that category. My first 11 years of school, I did very little. I was proud of not taking books home. It didn't matter. I got good grades. I didn't have to work for it. My senior year, I decided to go to work, and I took every tough teacher here that I could, and I actually learned to be a student, which really helped me. You know what? Gateway is better than most of the districts in Pennsylvania. They're already better. Now, if they're already better, you now require your athletes and your kids in the band and cheerleaders and whoever else, whatever else they're doing, you ask them already in a school district that's better to perform better than other people and still participate. I don't really want to throw out the names of other school districts, but you have some other school districts where those kids who are struggling, they manage to stay eligible and they still participate. It motivates them to keep working to stay eligible. It's just a continuing cycle. And I've seen it happen. Look, we can look back. I can look at some of those guys in our Sports Hall of Fame who went on to successful careers in business, graduated with honors in college, a couple of them doctors and lawyers, and I have to admit, I don't think I'd let any of them operate on me, looking back. But nevertheless, look, what changed their lives? The opportunity to do things, and they found out that once they began to work in the classroom enough to stay eligible, sometimes they got interested in those classes they weren't interested in before.
Coach LaBeouf, please pardon my interruption.
That's all right.
I think I know exactly where you're going. Could you get to the part where you tell us what you think is the program or the policy that you are most comfortable with? Or
I honestly think that what the
kids?
state says is good enough. I do that. There is an opportunity to fail. None of us here has gone into anything and not failed at some point for at least a little bit of time before we were successful. I think even if we are doing the same thing that the rest of the state is doing, we are not lowering academic standards. We are not doing that. We're already better. Look, I don't know how many times kids would come into my classroom from other districts, move into Gateway, whether it be from the city or move in from another state or even from some supposedly good schools. They would move into my classroom supposedly at the same level they were in those other schools, and guess what? They were struggling to keep their heads above the water. Sometimes we had to transfer them. I remember instances of taking kids that were put into an AP class. By the time they got to the second 9 weeks, they were in the general level because they couldn't make it here. And they were getting A's in the district they were in before, and it wasn't from the city. Where some of you were thinking, oh, it must have been the city schools. No, it wasn't from the city. It was from a well-reputed school district in the area. I'll just leave it at that. And I was surprised. They were surprised. They were working their tails off, and they couldn't get it done. Their skill level was not there. They didn't have the background to do it. And that's why I'm saying that. It's not a level playing field. It just isn't. We're better. And I say that with pride. I think we can always be better, but I don't think the answer is to have kids have to always be, those average kids always have to be at 100% of their best in order to continue to participate. That's where I was going with all of that. I just don't think it's an even playing field. We have kids with you know what, I think so many of us assume that all of the kids that come to Gateway, or most of them, have the same thing that we have. They've got a stable home. They've got economic advantages which allow them to be able to get on the net, for instance, to have a computer at home, to do whatever it takes. They've got parents who are supportive and help them whenever, or able to help them. And that just isn't the case. There are kids who are economically disadvantaged who have to work hours, and they're trying to do the sports stuff as well. Whatever it is, or the band, I hate to just use sports. That's where my area tends to be. But it's just not. And so they struggle and they struggle. And as I said, I've just seen so many kids give up. Now, some don't. But I can look at a couple of kids over the last 15 years who just gave up. They were successful on the track. They were working in the classroom, but they just couldn't get it up. And to be perfectly honest, sometimes all it takes is one teacher, how do I put this nicely, who has a problem with athletes, or who has a problem with one particular athlete. And that's all it takes for that kid to be ineligible under our current system. Under the state system, they have a chance to at least recover.
Coach, would you agree that there may be something between the state level
Yes.
and 2.0 that, you know, we've seemed to have reached this all or nothing point where it's either the PIA or Gateway's existing standard? And that's a loaded question.
It's a loaded question, but I think there's always a compromise available. You know, I would say go with the state standard, but there's always a compromise available. You know, some of you might want to say, well, you know what? You know what? One of the things that always bothers me, a kid could have one subject, he's struggling, and he's just an average student, but he's working his tail off. He's got all high C's, maybe even 1B, but he's really struggling. Like the percentages don't come into play at all, 0. Come into play at all. So let's just give the scenario where everybody, I don't know, you've got 6 major subjects and he's got all C's and they're all 78, 79, just barely below a B, but all it takes is 1 D. Guess where he is? Ineligible. Guess where she is? Ineligible. It's just, to me, that's just not okay. It's just not okay. When I started coaching, the state system was different than it is now. It was 2 Fs. If you had 2 Fs, you were done in a major subject. So you were given a little bit of leeway. You could fail one subject and still be eligible, but that second one got you off of the eligibility. Somewhere along the line that changed, and I quit paying attention because our standard was different, and so we worked hard to try to get the kids to be able to meet that particular standard. You know, I'm not telling you guys really anything that you don't know about the state standards. I don't think I'm telling you anything about what athletics can do for people or what the band can do for people. I have such an appreciation for people like Dr. Reed, who I worked with for 30-odd years, or some of the other folks that are involved with the extracurricular activities. Those people are spending so much time with these kids, and most of them, I believe, feel very much like I do. That there's a problem, there's something that's not quite right with the system, and it needs to be fixed. So is there a middle ground? There's always a middle ground. I don't know exactly what that is. Like I said, I would take the simple solution. It's not lowering standards. Not from my point of view, anyway. It's not lowering standards. Let me see if there's anything critical. I know that sometimes I can wax kind of long, and Dr. Short is smiling because he's been.
I've seen that act before.
Yeah, I know. Let's just put it this way. I think under the current standard, the kids are the ones who tend to be the losers. What was the statistic I saw? 20% of our student body is below a 2.0.
High school.
20%? Folks, that means some kids quit trying. And I've seen it with the kids who've been out for athletics. It's not just for athletics or the band or anybody else. They've quit trying because they just can't do it. I would wager, I don't know the statistics, but I would wager that in that first 15, 20 years that I taught here, that it wasn't anywhere near 20% who were below a 2.0. Now, you could say, well, maybe the demographics have changed, maybe this is, I don't think that's the case at all. I told you, I taught remedial kids. Those kids will work if you give them the right motivation. Those kids can accomplish but they've got to have the skill set, and you've got to give them the skill set. And it takes time to make the changes. So I think we need to give them a little bit of leeway, is what I'm trying to say.
Thank you, Mr. Bluff.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, and thank you for listening.
Thanks.
Mr. Ivy.
Hey, Scotty, before Mr. Ivy speaks, I just want to just give some additional information that would help the audience with some of Mr. LaBeouf's questions. The 2.0 policy was adopted by Gateway in 1997, and then that policy, which we can show later, we have it, it was pretty simple. It was basically you have to have a 2.0 to play. And then it was adjusted in 2002, 2003 school year to become a little more detailed and more stringent at that point, and that's the policy that should be up on the board now, which is still the current policy, which is what we're discussing tonight. That helps.
Good evening.
Please state your name and address for the record, sir.
Morty G. Ivy, 103 Orchard Street, Monroeville, 15146. I can concur. I concur with our athletic department, but I also want to just make a statement. We need to keep our children first and foremost at heart. Not thinking that we are lowering the standards, but we can help children. If you leave one child behind, then Gateway is behind. So we need to reach out for all our children. We need to work for them, even if we have to go back to the year 2013, where we had mandatory study hall, things where we helped our children. If you don't help them, they're already destined to fail. I saw you, I came to you, and I saw the program that you had. You brought in an equity coordinator, Dr. Woods, who is now the principal at Woodland Hills High School full-time. How is he helping our children? How are you helping our children? I'm a parent. I'm a taxpayer first. I'm a parent. Yes, I'm the father of a coach, but I'm concerned with every child still, even after I've retired in this school. Those that know me can tell you from the beginning that every child that I came in contact were like mine. All I want you to do is forget about the petty stuff that happened before, the past, and let's build now for our children for tomorrow. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Mr. Ivy.
Thank you, Mr. Ivy.
Carrie? Yep.
I'm giving her some of my time.
You have to lower the mic now.
Just like this? Okay. So what do I say? My name, Carrie Kunich, 2339 Saunders Station Road,
You're good.
Monroeville, PA. Okay, so I wrote because I don't like to just skip around. I like to get to the point. So over the last couple weeks, I've been reading a lot of posts on Facebook, and I feel like I have a lot of the same thoughts that Tom LaBeouf had. I really want to just put my kind of insight, foremost as a parent, also a teacher and a coach. I'm a parent of a 2017 grad, a 12th grader, an 8th grader, and a 4th grader. I'm extremely tough on my children, both academically, socially, behaviorally, and in their sports. So far, I think it's paid off. I can't really say that my methods are anything you'd find in a parenting book, but they've worked. As far as my kids going through the high school with the 2 boys, again, an excellent education at the high school. I want to kind of talk about what Tom said about our standards already being so much higher, so I think that has an even higher effect on the GPA. So my oldest, who's now a sophomore in college, said that the kids up at IUP said the college is so hard. He said it's not. He got a 4.0. He'd never got a 4.0 at Gateway, ever. He's like, it's so easy compared to Gateway. So that speaks volumes right there. The other issue I see is that can really affect GPA, and I don't want to throw Jordan under the bus, but he's turned out to be a very successful, he's at IUP on a ROTC scholarship, so he turned out okay after his major falter. But what happened his freshman year, which is part of the way we calculate GPA, which I don't think all districts do it. I did talk to a girl from Penn Trafford today. So we make so the final grade for the year, 10% of the final exam is figured into that. So Jordan was coasting along, thinking he was doing pretty good all year, his freshman year. He had a B in 2 classes. Specifically, I remember it was Spanish and English. So he thought he was going to get a B in there for the year. So he didn't take that final very seriously, being a freshman. He still would have been eligible, but it was not a pretty sight where he had to dig out of after his freshman year. And I don't think that, again, makes it even harder to keep your GPA. I wonder how many kids get themselves in that situation. This was a child who had a B all year in a class, and his final grade for the year in that class, in 2 classes, was a C, which gave him 2 2.0s computed into his grade point average. So we had to spend the next 4 years, I say we because I was all over him for it, digging out of that hole. It was a major hole to dig out of. So my point is, even using the PIA standards, it's much harder, just like Tom said, at Gateway than it is a lot of other places. I hear it over and over, and I just think the examples I gave there with my own children, are the same thing. Many comments that I've read on social media seem to revolve around high school athletes playing sports in college and getting scholarships. I'm really not sure that's why most of the kids play sports. Being a coach, I've seen the positive impact playing has on the players, even the bench players. I want to hold them accountable, I do. I've had players and managers get in trouble at school. Okay, you missed this away game, but you can come to the next one. I feel like with kids, we always have to give them a chance to quickly redeem themselves, because long-term doesn't mean anything. I think that's where the quitting comes into play and not wanting to try. To me, when a student is ineligible and they're running the streets or just sitting at home, there's no chance for them to have a positive impact from a coach or the chance to feel part of a team and be influenced by their peers. Which brings me back to the point that every child does not have parents at home to provide the support needed. I would much rather see more kids in the gym, on the field, on a stage, and not running the streets. So many students, not just athletes, need our support, as Mr. Ivey said. We need more ways to help these kids. I think when I stood here 2 years ago, I said we have no math lab, we have no writing lab, we have no activity bus, and we have lack of after-school tutoring programs to help these students. I know there's some kids who are never going to take advantage of that. I get that. I'd like to see everybody succeed, but in a perfect world, that doesn't happen. So my things that I think we need to consider is, why are we holding kids that want to be involved to a higher standard than those that don't want to participate? Why is it okay to graduate with a 1.0, but we're not okay with the PIA standard? Some students are going to make many mistakes, but we need to be there to support them and support the kids not involved and the kids involved. Some kids take much longer than others to figure it out. I can't see a winner here if we prevent more kids from participating. We take away everything high school is about. Think back to all the mistakes we made in high school. No, you don't have to share them. But think of the coaches, the mentors that helped you overcome those mistakes. I'm in favor of more academic support and keeping more kids involved. I've witnessed the impact it has, and I understand you probably don't all agree, but I've seen it every day for 22 years, and I feel like they're not all on an even playing field, so we really need to think about how we can help them. That's it.
Thanks, Gary.
Janet Kelly.
Hi, I'm Janet Kelly, 707 Millbury Road, Monroeville, and I'm also speaking on the 2.0 policy. I'm also going to speak on behalf, I'm going to read a letter from Nancy Gormley, 607 Greenleaf Drive, who was unable to be here. I would like to say thank you to Coach LaBeouf. He had all three of my kids, and I can attest to the fact that he was a very demanding teacher, as well as a very demanding coach. But I'm going to speak a little bit on the opposite side to an extent. But anyway, let me start by reading Nancy's letter. Dear members of the Gateway School Board, I would like to urge you all to vote no to the board resolution to suspend board policy 122.1 regarding educational requirements to participate in athletic activities in the Gateway School District. At a recent board meeting, Ms. Warning cited the following reasons for the suspension of this policy. I will address her points individually. To align, quote, to align with the other surrounding areas and districts, unquote. For what purpose do we need to align with neighboring districts? We are not in a competitive situation for recruiting athletes. And shouldn't we be in a position of being a leader in our community rather than lowering our standards to match those of our lower performing neighbors? A school district with strong academic achievement will entice people to move to Monroeville and Pitcairn and will strengthen our tax base, making more dollars available for the education of our children. Quote, give more students the opportunity to participate in activities that can have a positive, dramatic effect on their education, unquote. This certainly will provide more students the ability to participate in athletics, but will have a counter effect on their education. If you want the student to be well-versed in which plays to run in which sporting situation, this policy is for you. If you want the students to learn that hard work will pay off in rewards with immediate consequences, parentheses, the ability to participate in athletics, and long-term gains, parentheses, being prepared for life as a self-sufficient adult, suspending this policy is not the route to take. Quote, provide necessary motivation and structure many struggle to find, unquote. What could be more motivating to a student who wants to play a sport than a required GPA that takes more effort than simply showing up for class? These children are not going to graduate and get a job where their supervisor lowers the requirements of the position because the employee doesn't want to work hard for his or her paycheck. But that's what lowering the standards is teaching them. And what more structure can there be than having to go to school each day with a scheduled educational plan and attend special tutoring programs designed to help them succeed? Why do children go to school? One of the main reasons is to prepare them for adulthood. While not every student will go to college, each of these children hope to grow into adults who can support themselves. They want to live on their own and buy things, but the adult world isn't easy. No one is going to coddle these students turned workers. They will need to have an ability to read, write, and to do mathematics. I can't imagine why anyone tasked with responsibility of educating students would choose to lower standards. What message is this sending to our students? Do you want to be the board member who is saying to the students of the Gateway School District, quote, we know you aren't capable of succeeding in the classroom, so at least we'll let you play sports while you're killing time in the Gateway School District, unquote. Because lowering these standards to those of the PIAA is saying just that. You're telling them that they are incapable of succeeding in the classroom, and that's a heartbreaking message to send. Again, I implore you to say no to the resolution to suspend this policy. Nancy Gormley, Monroeville resident and proud parent of 2 Gateway Athletics alumni. And then also, I would like to also encourage you, I think, in my opinion, it's a disservice to this, lowering the GPA requirement is a disservice to the school district. I'm concerned that lowering the GPA requirement may result in lower test scores because students would no longer find it necessary to achieve a 2.0 average since it's no longer an eligibility requirement. Lower academic performance will then impact state test scores as well as SAT scores, lowering the average rating for the district. Lowering the GPA requirement is also sending an inappropriate message to all students. It's sending a message that participating in sports or extracurricular activities is more important than academic performance. That is not the message the district should be sending to the students. I think it's a disservice to the teachers. If students participating in sports or extracurricular activities are no longer required to achieve a 2.0 average, then many students will no longer be motivated to achieve that goal. That will make the teacher's job more difficult in motivating the students to achieve. Teachers then have a more difficult battle to have their students perform at an expected level on state tests when they're not expected to meet a reasonably stringent level of performance in the classroom. It's a disservice to the parents. For the parents who are concerned about the academic performance of their children, they will end up fighting a battle with their children regarding academic performance that the school district is condoning, namely lower expectations. How's a parent going to overcome their child's argument that the performance is acceptable to the school district for them to participate, so why isn't it acceptable to the parent? And finally, and most importantly, I think it's a disservice to the students. The job of a school was to educate the students. Sports and extracurricular activities are amenities to add to the school experience as well as the overall development of students. A school district is selling its students short when it determines that lower expectations are necessary because some students are not motivated enough to put forth the effort to achieve a C, but they would be motivated if all they needed to achieve was a D. As a math teacher, I guarantee you that achieving a D in Algebra 1 will make the students and the teacher's job much more difficult even to achieve a D in Algebra 2. It will make it unlikely that the student will be proficient on the Algebra Keystone exam and hinder the student's performance on the math section of the SAT. Currently, Gateway is ranked 41 out of 491 school districts for best school districts for your buck in Pennsylvania, based on 2015 data. And that's from NerdWallet. Sports were not even a consideration for this ranking. In addition, Gateway School District received a B+ rating, and more specifically, Gateway High School received an A- rating in NICH's 2019 Best Schools Report. I believe the current GPA requirement positively impact those ratings and that lowering the GPA requirement will negatively impact them. I believe this because I believe that lowering the GPA requirement will also lower the motivation of some students who maintain that GPA because they need it to participate in sports or extracurricular activities. It will not just be the currently struggling student who will then be eligible to participate by achieving a D, but it will be the students who are motivated to achieve that C to be eligible who will then be able to slack off and achieve a D and still participate. But that doesn't mean that the coaches, the teachers, the administration shouldn't care about the struggling students, students who are struggling to meet the GPA requirement for eligibility in sports. I do not believe that lowering the GPA requirement is the appropriate response to these students. I believe that tutoring should be provided to assist these students in the class or classes in which they're struggling. If they truly want to participate in sports, they should be encouraged to participate in tutoring, whether it be by a teacher or perhaps a National Honor Society student. Perhaps that little bit of extra attention will motivate that needy student to achieve to the necessary level. I'll not read the rest. But I will say, I mean, I agree with some of the points that they were making as well. I think just flat out dropping the policy is not the way to go, possibly revising the policy. I agree with freshmen, maybe, because even in college, for scholarships, for example, there's usually a lower GPA requirement for a freshman going to their sophomore year to maintain a scholarship than it is for like a sophomore going to a junior or a junior going to a senior. So I agree that there are people, ninth graders in particular, that have to adjust to college, just like the first year of college is an adjustment for students. And so perhaps there should be something that might be taken into consideration. I don't think just flat out saying we no longer have a policy, let's just drop it altogether. I personally don't think that's the way to go, because I think that will cause, I think there'll be fallback from that as well. I definitely think we should be helping those ones that are struggling. Our job is to educate. Isn't there something that we can do to not just make sure they can participate in sports, but to make sure they're getting the education that they need so that when they graduate, they have the skills that they need? Anyway, I don't think just flat out dropping the policy is the way to go. That's my personal opinion. I think there's going to be ramifications to that in a lot of different areas. But I definitely think that there's room for improvement. Like I said, you might want to consider, I think, the scholarship thing. freshmen in high school or freshmen in college, rising sophomores have a lower GPA requirement to keep their scholarship. It goes up as you go up the ladder. You might want to do something like that, like think a little bit differently from freshmen, something you might want to consider. But anyway, I'm beyond my time, but
Thank you.
that, I just wanted to.
Dawn Hall.
Hi, my name is Don Hall. I'm the current football coach here at Gateway. Good evening, Dr. Short and members of the school board. A couple thoughts. Different perspective from Tom. You know, I've coached a number of places. I've been a number of high schools. I've been a collegiate coach. I've recruited student athletes. I've taught in the classroom for almost 20 years as well. So I'm a teacher, a parent of some college athletes, and 5 children of my own that have graduated from high school and attended college. Different perspective coming in from, you know, Tom had a career as a student and a teacher here, and some others have mentioned it. One of my favorite quotes is by G.K. Chesterton, and it's, you know, when you come into a new situation, never tear down a fence until you know why it was put up in the first place. So I think as a sort of a new CEO, fresh set of eyes, sort of, we've all been in that situation where you come into a situation and you say, okay, why are we doing what we're doing? And you kind of look at it first before you make any rash changes or sudden knee-jerk reactions to what's going on. So through the time I've been here, going into my 3rd year, I've looked at a lot of different things that go on at Gateway, and certainly from a new perspective, a fresh set of eyes, if you will. And one that always, to me, had a huge disconnect from places I've been, again, multiple high schools and college as well, as a student athlete in college and as a coach in college, is this eligibility policy. Basically, what we're talking about, the fundamental disconnect is, you know, let's talk about my collegiate experience. I went to the United States Naval Academy. The Naval Academy, we had on our rings, 2.0 and go. You know, you needed a 2.0 to graduate from the Naval Academy. What's the Naval Academy? It's a highly selective, I'd like to call it an elite academic institution. Very difficult to achieve that 2.0 in college. And with that 2.0, you have selective admission, you have expected and even desired attrition. You want to make it so everybody can't make it through that place. And ultimately, you need a 2.0 to graduate. So it makes sense that if you want to participate there, you need a 2.0. You need to continue to reach that level. And that 2.0 will also get you your diploma and your commission in the military service. A public school district, and now I'm clearly talking about Gateway, it's not selective. You know, we're going to educate every young person who comes through the door. We're going to take every ability level. We want everyone to graduate. We don't want students to fail. Attrition is totally undesirable. We want everybody to make it all the way through if we can, whether that's realistic or not. You need a 1.0 to graduate. You have to pass. I'm a regular social studies teacher, a history teacher at Seneca Valley School District. I teach some students in regular education, and I know from coaching and teaching, you have different ability levels, different ceilings, different expectations. As a coach and as a teacher, sometimes a student who passes or a player who finds a way to make a team, that's worthy of a celebration. We're talking about, as Tom had mentioned, there's a lot of students who don't have a lot of advantages, don't have the ability to do certain things, whether it be as in whatever field they're in, and we're celebrating when they reach their ceiling or their expectation level. Again, it's a win. I'll get back to that in a minute. I've mentioned I've been other places, so specifically speaking of the Gateway policy. It's more stringent than any place I've ever coached as a high school coach. I coached at a place called Tunkhannock area in the Wilkes-Barre-Scranton area. I coached at Seneca Valley, as I mentioned. I've also coached at Erie Cathedral Prep, which is a private Catholic school in Erie. This one supersedes all of those places. It's by far the most stringent and by far has the most ineligible students of any place I've ever been. And I don't think that's a coincidence. I think if you transposed our policy on any place else I've been, all you'd have is that other place would have a lot more ineligible students than Gateway does when you flip them around. And why is that? Well, let's talk about Cathedral Prep, for instance. Considered private school. Hopefully you're getting a good education for your dollar there. They have an entrance exam. They have selective admission. They have selective retention. If they don't want you there, they can kick you out. If you don't perform, they can make you go away. The policy there is of the philosophy that you can serve both masters. You can be very serious about academics and still do right by the student. There, and we talked about some compromises potentially, there they say, look, you're going to basically, if you're failing one class, you're still eligible. When you fail a second one, you have 5 days to remediate that and try to get eligible again, get one of those grades back up to a D. And if you do, you're still eligible. And if you don't, you're out for a week. That's pretty close to the PIAA policy. The one thing that I was going to talk about here, in addition, in comparing all of them, is the standard bell curve. And I'm a football coach, and I actually asked Bob Brown earlier if I could get a marker and draw a bell curve on that board. I probably was going to start drawing a play for you guys to look at and evaluate. But my point is, I won't go draw the bell curve. But if you're familiar with the standard bell curve and you look at it as it relates to grading, the middle of that thing is a C plus, C minus. And on the right side of that thing are 34% C, 14% B, 2% A. And on the left is the same. 34% C minus, okay, 14% D, 2% F. When we run 11 guys out on the football field, if 10 of them know what to do, I feel like, okay, well, maybe one guy just doesn't get it. I mean, I jokingly say, and I'm a Catholic, and I hope I don't get struck by lightning, even Jesus Christ himself only got 11 out of 12. So I understand that you're not always going to get everybody on the same page. And there are 2% that are going to fail, okay? But it shouldn't be 50%. I mean, a C minus and below, you're ineligible at Gateway. That's unbelievable for a public school district who has to educate every child who walks in the door, in my estimation. So again, that kind of condenses the whole bell curve discussion, but I wanted to make sure. So back to GK Chesterton. You know, why was that fence put up in the first place? I don't know. I don't know if it was an answer to students moving in that didn't have high standards. I don't know if we had a particularly high achieving population at the time and that demographic has changed. I'm not sure the genesis in 1997 or the revisit in 2002, but I know that I've been a lot of places where when you compare those things, they're not equitable with other students in other school districts that are competing and succeeding in all different walks of extracurricular activity. Lastly, we hear a lot of discussion about what does it take to be eligible to be a college athlete. And we say, well, they need the 2.3 and they need the sliding scale and the test grade. But I have 3 sons who, one that graduated and 2 that currently play college football, and one's at Colgate. Colgate's a pretty prestigious academic institution as well. I'm proud of that. I'm proud of him. And basically there, as a collegiate athlete, you need to be scheduled. You need to take 12 hours of classes per semester and be passing 6 to be eligible to continue to play a sport in college at a place like Colgate. So I'm not saying that, that's a wonderful scenario that you wouldn't pass all your classes or anything like that, but we're talking about prestigious collegiate athletic or institutions, academic institutions that have a standard like that across the NCAA. So people get mired in this idea that you got to have this higher than average grade point average to get to college and to stay in college and play. And the last thing I would say is I think the description or the characterization of this idea as lowering the standard is just a misrepresentation. We're talking about taking a standard that is completely mismatched with a public school district and putting it at an equitable level for a public school district. We're not talking about taking it and saying we're going to throw out the PIAA and we're going to operate in some netherworld that's far below any minimum that's out there and ask our kids not to succeed. We're just basically putting it in a congruent situation with a public school district in 2018. I thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
Anybody else that wishes to address on agenda items? Cindy?
While Cindy's coming up, Mr. Rovesti, you're the athletic director here. You may not have been planning to speak, but I value your input, and if you would have some thoughts for us, if you could put those together, I'd like to hear them. Because we're trying to divide the baby. Should it be athletics or should it be academics? You have some experience here that might help us when we make our decision, okay?
Go ahead, Ms. Lucas.
My name is Cindy Lucas. I live on Ramsey Road in Monroeville. And I am here also to speak on the 2.0 grade point average. And I'm going to start with our coaches, what they had to say before I came up. And I would like to say that, Mr. LaBeouf, about the time you started at Gateway was roughly about the time I graduated from Gateway. And at that time, our grade point average was 94 to 100 was an A, 87 to 93 was a B, and 75 to 87 was a C. I graduated with 770 students. Mr. Pete Annamarino, Coach Annamarino, was the football coach at that time. At that time, he was the only football coach that had won a WPIAL Quad 4 championship title, and our football teams were quite large, so somehow or other they managed to be eligible. It's hard for me to be here. I can't believe I'm here after all these years, but because I was part of, I guess, hard to believe, that group in 1997 that wanted the 2.0 grade point average, and that's what first ignited my interest in the school board, even though I am a Gateway graduate. I can't stress enough how strongly I believe that our first responsibility is to the education of our children. It's one of the reasons why when I got married and decided to raise a family, I came back to Gateway. I am the proud parent of two soon-to-be 30-year-old children who were both athletes. My son played 4 years of college soccer at Case Western Reserve. He's now a physician. My daughter has her doctorate. They managed, and I know we are on one end of the spectrum, and I'm not saying anything about the other end of the spectrum. However, all that being said, I think we need tools in place to help those students at the other end of the spectrum. And I know when Terry Smith was here, and he was the coach and the athletic director, those kids went to study halls before they played football. And they went to study halls before they practiced. And Terry Smith was a Penn State graduate, so he knows. And Paterno only recruited those individuals who had a decent grade point average. I think, and it's been said before, we do a tremendous disservice to our children if we don't expect higher than a 0.55. I think we do a disservice to our community when we say, this is fine, this is all we need. Why can't we strive to be the best? What's wrong with expecting more than average? What's wrong with being stringent in a day and an age where we need that? And I know so well that everyone doesn't come from the same background, and everyone isn't afforded the same opportunities. But what we can afford them here is a quality education. And we can know that the kids leave here with a quality education to make them successful in wherever they go and whatever they do. And I am extremely passionate about this. I'm extremely passionate about teaching. I have the utmost respect for the profession. And I think as a board, as a community of athletes, teachers, we owe it to our children to expect more. And as Janet said, compromise, sure, compromise is always a good thing. But to go from a 2.0 to a 0.55, I think is just incomprehensible to me. So that's really all I have to say, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good catch. I'm glad I have it in my page.
Sir? Or does somebody else?
I'll make this fast, but also,
As Cindy, I'm a Gateway graduate. My name is Cheryl Boyce. I live in Point Circle in Monroeville. I have 2 kids that played sports here and also did very well in Gateway. Here's the thing, the coach left, so I can't answer his question. What happened in that time frame? It's called the state got tired of hearing the excuses why kids weren't succeeding academically. It's called college and workforce readiness. It's called the Keystone exams. It's called the PSSA. Those things didn't exist when I was in school. They didn't exist when Cindy was in school. They were put in place because, and this is a banner in the Penn State Museum. It's not about academic excellence. It's about the next 30 years of their life. And they can't see beyond Friday as a teenager. But your job, and somehow you've got to do it, and you've got to make a compromise. I've read the NCAA regulations. I've read the PIAA regulations. I know more about the Keystone exams than I want to, and I don't like them. But you're making a case for keeping them and making them a graduation requirement. And for the parents that are sitting here, the state wants to make that a requirement, and if your kids can't pass those tests, then they don't get to graduate. So you better be worried, because they're looking at you and they're saying, when these kids walk out the door, and if they want to go to tech school, and we've got kids coming in there that can't measure with a tape measure, 1/4 of an inch, we don't want them. So yes, my kids were athletes. And you know what? They didn't play 1 game a week on a Friday night and had the weekend to recuperate. They played several times during the week. They didn't get off the bus until 10 o'clock at night some nights, and they had to be in class in the next morning. We can't make excuses. You've got to look at this from a couple different perspectives. Yes, this motivates kids. Yes, there's kids that this will help them. I get that. But the state and the people of the powers to be, and administration knows this, are putting things in place because they don't want to hear these excuses anymore, because employers are upset, colleges are sick and tired of getting kids in there that can't graduate. And you know what? I feel like after listening to this, I'm going to write the Department of Ed and saying, even though I have said for the last 5 years, I don't like the Keystones, maybe we need them. Maybe these kids need to fail these tests, and maybe everyone will get the message that this is serious. They have got to do something. A 0.5 is not acceptable. A 1.0 is not acceptable. That's not average. A C minus, 2.0 is average. That's not average. So the state and the PIAA are not on the same page, folks. They haven't been for a long time. And this has been brought to the attention of those powers to be in Harrisburg, that you have a problem with the PIAA regulations and what you're promoting. So I don't know. All I know is I've heard nonstop, we can't let these kids come out without basic skills, without some form of mastery and some basic level. So you have to figure it out. You lower it, I want to see what the scores are going to be like. You know, how many kids are we talking about? What do their scores look like after this happens? Because parents don't get what the state's trying to say, because they don't know that. They're not in that network. They don't get that. They only see what's in front of them. But they have to understand, people are watching you, and you know that. Every move a district makes, they're watching you to see what you're doing, and they're making changes accordingly because they want these kids to do better, and in too many cases, they aren't.
Thank you.
I'm Jim Kelly, 707 Bilberry Drive, Monroeville. I didn't come to the meeting intending to speak, but listening to Coach LaBeouf, he mentioned an issue that has been an issue in my mind for years, something that didn't make sense. It was also mentioned by another speaker, and it was about a student who had a number of high C's and then a D, made them ineligible. I'm going to open up a can of worms. Maybe look at it, thinking outside the box. What we do in the grading system is we take very precise measurements. You have a 79.49, and you have a C. You have a 79.51, and you have a B. So we take that 79.49 and we make it 2.0. And we take that other one, we make it a 3.0. I'm inventing a word. You crudify. You crudify a very precise measurement. And then, at the end of the student's academic career, you take all of these very crude measurements, you add them all together, and you divide them up to the thousandth of a point. And you get very precise measurements again. This doesn't make sense. It made sense in the 19th century and the 20th century before computers. It doesn't make sense now. Why do we do this? Okay? Now, this might only be a part of the solution, if compromised, whatever, to change the grading system. So a 79 wouldn't be a 2.0. Maybe it would be a 2.9. Why do we have to do it? Because we've always done it that way. Nobody does it this way. Think outside the box. Think what makes sense. I'm done. Thank you.
Nicely
Thank
done.
you.
Thank you, sir.
I love that guy.
Anybody else wish to address the board on agenda items?
Dan Alexander, 407 Revere Drive, Monroeville. I wasn't intending to speak tonight or anything like that, but I'm listening to my fellow coaches and concerned parents and all that. As most of you know, I have kids in the district. I have kids that graduated from here, and me and my wife are very, very strict when it comes to academics. Gateway has provided an exceptional education, so much so that my son Jason was able to get practically a full academic scholarship to WVU. And going along with what Carrie said, he agrees that when he's taking chemical engineering, a tough class, he's got a 4.0, he's starting his junior year, and he says what he learned at Gateway has helped him because it's made his classes at WVU easier. So it is a lot more strict here at Gateway. That having been said, as a parent, as a coach, I see a lot of these kids come out and they're struggling. Like Coach LaBeouf said, they're struggling. Okay, they're trying. I was one of those kids. I'm a product of the Pittsburgh School District, and I would have been academically ineligible. Trust me. Had 1.0 in math. Okay, so, and it wasn't because I couldn't get it. It was just I didn't care. I just wanted to skate through. It wasn't until I went to college that I finally kicked in and I did well. But my point is, some of these kids that you see out, I've been coaching for 11 years of various sports, some of these kids you see out on the field don't have great home lives, okay? They don't have parents who care, parents who sit down at night and go over things with them, who they basically say, did you do your homework? Yeah, okay, that's it, if they get that, okay? So they're really like me. My parents did help me in that and forced me, I just, didn't listen. But they just skate through, okay? They don't have a reason to. The 2.0, I can see both sides of the argument. I can see the kids wanting to, you want these kids to be involved in band, to be involved in sports. My kids are involved in sports. They're involved in band. And it's their way of being a part of something because they might not have the home life or that they can feel they're a part of something that can succeed. Even kids who are shy join, say, the football team, okay? All of a sudden they start making friends, they're a part of something, they feel better about themselves, they do better. So you want to give your kids every opportunity to play sports, to play extracurricular activities. However, at least for me, academics has to come first because, let's face it, most of these kids ain't gonna be professional musicians. Most of these kids ain't gonna be professional athletes. They will be out in the workforce. Okay, so they will have to go college or trade or something like that, but they're going to have to succeed, all right? So to do that, they're going to need to keep their grades up. That having been said, it is up to this board, if you decide to keep the 2.0 requirement, to provide them with the opportunity to succeed, meaning tutoring, bring back the math lab, bring back, reading. Tutoring classes, and I know that's really hard right now for you guys thanks to the Monroeville tax debacle, that you guys are really strict on the budget right now because you'd have to pay teachers and tutors and all that, okay, to stay after and help these kids. A suggestion to do is instead of making them ineligible, if they don't make the 2.0, if they're failing one class or two classes, whatever it is, and they don't make the 2.0, don't make them ineligible to play the sport right away. Put them on probation. They can play the sport, okay? But they have to attend the tutoring once or twice a week in, say, math, whatever class they're failing in. They'd have to attend it, and they'd have to get a signature and have to show the coach, yes, I attended, here's the signature. The coaching staff would have to be supportive. If they need to miss a practice because of a test coming up, then we allow them to miss that practice, okay? To help them get them. So we'd have to support them and help them and encourage them to do well. And it would be up to you guys to provide the means with tutoring and stuff like that to do well. So you put them on probation, they can still play the sports, they can still be part of the team with the understanding that they have to go to tutoring and they have to signature. We support them, you guys support them, and we help get this kid up. And if he doesn't want to be bothered or something like that, he doesn't go to the tutoring and that, well then I guess he really doesn't want to be a part of the band. He really doesn't want to be part of the football team or whatever, okay? And that's just how it's going to be, you know. But if he really wants to, and we provide the means, and we provide the support, and we provide the encouragement as coaches and as, you know, school district, then we help him to succeed. He brings his grade up. Everybody's happy. He feels better because he starts succeeding. He's still part of the team. He's still part of the group. And he's getting something that they're probably not getting at home, which is help. So, but it's up to you guys, and I don't envy you because you got to figure out a way with the budget and everything to make it happen. But you do got to bring back things like the math lab and stuff. Give these kids the opportunity. If you're going to give the stringent and say you got to get your grades up, you got to give them a path to get the grades up. That's very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else wish to address this board? Hold on, Jen.
Hello, my name is Dino Lotito. I live at 401 College Park Drive, Monroeville. I'm going into my senior year this year. To be honest, the only reason I'm here tonight is I had to come to a meeting for a Boy Scout requirement. I did know that you were speaking on the GPA tonight because my sister follows you guys on what you speak on. I would like to speak a bit about being a student and participating in multiple academic areas. My 8th grade and freshman year, I did participate in the Gateway Band. And then my sophomore year, I participated in the Gateway Lacrosse, coached by Mr. Alexander. The 2.0, in my opinion, is a bit strict. I would like to say myself, I have a condition, dyslexia. It's a bit of a trouble to read and write for me, so I do struggle in my English classes. In other classes where you have to form essays and argue points are not my strong point. Last year, I only finished the year with a 2.3, which is meeting the requirements, but I did fail my English class. I don't strive in English, having that disability. The only reason I can keep my grades high as I can, I do participate in band. I'm a musician. I've played many instruments since I was a young boy. I strive in math and science. I got a 98 in my science class last year. But people like me that have this problem and don't have the advantages that I have, such as being a musician and being able to take band and get that high A, that 98%, or being good at math and being able to get the high percent in that math and science department. We really struggle because we love to participate in these activities. I see other friends that have similar disabilities as me in band who struggle to keep their grades up, who have to work so hard to keep it at that level, even dropping below sometimes and getting that kicked out of this thing they love to do, such as band or another academic after-school program. I think that maybe lowering it all the way down to a 0.5 is a little bit of a drop, but there needs to be some kind of help for students such as myself. I do have support aides in school in classes like English, but it's not always about that. They help me in class, but I can't always get the help outside of school at my house when I'm forming an essay or writing a paper to argue something, I can't form those correct sentences. I mean, I get the aid, I appreciate it in class, but at home it's a little bit harder, especially because dyslexia can be genetic, and yes, my mother has dyslexia, and my father does not have the best English, being from South America. So I do find the 2.0 a little bit much as a requirement, because I do love to play these sports as well, to be involved in other after-school activities. So I would like to ask you all to consider lowering the 2.0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jeanette Beagle. I live in Wiltshire Circle in Monroeville. And I have a couple questions because I'm not clear. What is the PIAA standard? Like, what does that equate to in the GPA realm? Does it get you even graduated in the state? Do you earn your diploma with the bare minimum from the PIAA? What are we doing to help these kids now that are currently falling below? And yeah, the rest were already asked, so if you could, that's my questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeanette.
Mr. Ravesti?
Randy's coming down. Anybody else?
No pressure, Randy, no pressure.
Pressure, no notes, no nothing. My name's Randy Ravesti. I am a proud Gateway alumni. That's why I'm back here. I played on the first championship team. I was probably the worst player on the team, but I still played and competed. This is not about academics and activities. The standards are the standards. You know, a teacher should, if we were going to lower the standards, we would tell all our teachers, don't give our students anything lower than a C. We don't want to do that. We want to continue to strive where they have to work to maintain and work hard. So I'm all for academics. I went to William & Mary, if anybody knows about that. You either have to be extremely bright or play football, so you can guess how I got in. But at the end of the day, I've taught, I've coached. I was a middle school principal for a long time. I was director of student activities and transportation for a longer time. And the most important thing in today's society is social skills, getting along with people. You know, in my day, everybody in Mellon Plan, Boyd Hill, when you graduated from high school, if you graduated from high school, you worked in a mill. Those opportunities aren't there. Most of the world now, you have to be social. You gain social skills by belonging to an activity. And it's not about football. It's not about the other sports. It's about a kid having the opportunity to enjoy all the Gateway has to offer. You know, I love the band. You know, the school I was at before, I loved the band. Those kids work extremely hard. They're very proud. They're together. Years from now, they'll talk about their positive experiences. Someone mentioned Coach Anna Marino. You know, all those experiences that weren't positive, we love and we talk about today. So I think we're talking about a number of different things. I've heard different people say, okay, it's how we compute it. And I've been saying, you know, that's wrong. And someone said it well, if you get a lot of high C's, there's still a C. And if you get one bad grade, it ruins your time here. I'm not a fan of the PIA minimum requirements. I think you should be working towards graduation. Can everybody hear me when I'm not talking into this thing?
Yeah.
You should be working to graduate. Now, I believe this from a young age when I taught that each kid is gifted in something. It might not be math, it might not be English, it might not be class. I have a cousin who couldn't multiply 2 times 2, but he can look at a fenced-in concrete thing and he can tell you it's 2.5 yards needs to go in there. He just knows that stuff. There are other people who tear cars apart and put them back together. but they struggled here, and they've all made more money than I've made in my lifetime. There's a lot of different ways to make a living. One of the things that I believe with all my heart is that a mentor, a coach, a club person has the ability to make an effect, a positive effect on somebody who may not get that. You know, when I had the bright kids, that's easy. I didn't have to do anything. They achieved on their own. The ones I took great joy in was getting kids back in that day when I taught physical science, just to have them bring the book to class. And then the next step is to have them open it sometime and not sleep. You know, but it's a struggle. When I was an assistant principal, I had parents come in and sit across from me and say, you know, I don't know what to do. Can you help me? We've taken them to Hunting Learning Center. We've taken them here, taken them there, tutors. You know, they just don't get it. And some kids just don't get it. And before I go any further, that was a great job. Very nice. George. Very proud of you. Also, before I forget, Coach Hall texted me, and he wanted everybody to know that he was speaking on behalf of a lot of the families for football. He asked them to stay away because he wanted to keep it professional, and he is a professional man. But I think, and I look back at my high school team, WPL championships. We had guys that achieved very well. We had guys who didn't. But all of them went on and found success in life. And I think a lot of it had to do with Coach Betts, Coach Hanley, Coach Klippa, who is a Serbian. Turn that thing off, please. Coach Klippa's no longer here, but I used to get more kisses from him than I got from my wife later in the year because he was such an influence on my life. All my coaches, all my teachers, South Junior High, for you guys who might remember that, it's not about lowering the standards. It's about getting kids involved so they have some positive experience coming out of here. And we had kids last year who were ineligible half the time, but they're in the Army. You know, and if you can go to the Army, you should be able to join a band, or you should be able to shoot a basketball, or you should be able to do some things. I would like to see, and this is just me because you asked me to talk, that we do away with this now and form a committee to look at what would be in the best interest of all the kids, the bright kids and the low achievers. And if we have to spend money to get people tutored, let's do it. You know, I wasn't prepared, and I apologize. I ramble, but I do believe in each and every kid has some special qualities. And if we kick the ones that can't meet the academic standards, you know, I think shame on us. There are a lot of good kids who have given up, and maybe have given up coming to school just for some simple fact because they couldn't belong to the chess club if we have one, or something like that. Can I take any questions on athletics? Or it's not about athletics. You know, I could care less if, well, I could care. We've won 2 championships last year. We got great coaches in place. They're great role models. That's what you want. We got great teachers. I was a principal. I walked down the hall when Dr. Short was the principal, and I coached him at some football camps way back. Our teachers teach from bell to bell. Classrooms are open. They're demanding, as they should be. And like I said, my thing, if we are lowering academic standards, we should do away with all extracurricular activities. That shouldn't even be thought about. What should be thought about is we're going to continue our AP classes. We're going to make kids work. The best coach that I had as far as academics was Mr. Hoffman. He's dead. He was my baseball coach. I come in there, you know, I'm a bright kid, and holy heck, he's making me work. What's wrong with this guy, you know? When I got to college, he was the guy that prepared me the most. We want teachers that are going to be demanding. We want teachers that are going to keep after kids. But we also have to understand that not everybody is going to fully able to achieve that. We want them working towards those goals, but some just can't do it, and those are the ones that are going to be left behind. That No Child Left Behind was the worst thing they came out with because everybody wasn't created equal. Idealistically, it was a great concept, but at the end of the day, it was a big failure. So anyway, I listened to all the thoughts. I thought they were all great. It's okay to disagree, but it's never okay to become disagreeable. I hope we could come to some type of solution that would be in the best interest of all kids, and that's, I know as a school board member, I know that's your motto. We're going to do what's right by kids. As parents, we should do what's right by kids, and if I offended anybody with my thoughts, I apologize, but I am definitely for academics. I'm for social skills for kids. I'm for kids belonging to something. So I'm going to be on TV. My hair's not combed because I don't have any hair. And, but I thank you for your time, and I talked too long. And Bonnie, I was just kidding about turning that off. Any questions?
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Randy.
Thank you, Randy.
Anybody else wish to address the board on agenda items? George?
I'd like to speak on this agenda item, if possible.
Lene, I think you're the only one left.
You didn't speak, Lene.
You good?
George would like to speak.
Am I allowed?
Yeah, it's Mary.
Thank you. Good evening. I'd like to thank you all, for coming. It shows us you are concerned as I am. I made a promise to myself and the people of my district, foremost to the students, that was to always work for you and the betterment of the district. You know not everyone will play in the NFL or skate at the arena. Not everyone will be a National Honor Society candidate. This, in fact, and we all know it, but for some kids, sports at this level may be the only chance they will have to challenge themselves and their abilities to inspire their dreams, if only 4 years at the high school level. Our school activities teach teamwork, leadership, friendship, and the drive to strive for personal goals that will hopefully carry on to the future. We only want the best for our children. This is why it's so distressing to have the verbal attacks that are going on against my colleague and friend, Ms. Val Warning. As chair and spokesman of the policy committee, she recommended a policy change of 2.0 to the PIA rules for student athletics. After much discussion on the matter, it was agreed upon by the rest of the committee. Myself, Mr. McIntyre, and Dr. Schwartz, a few opinions. Years ago, we had an AD football coach who was recruiting players for out of the district. That's when the 2.0 went into effect. It was also disgusting the 200-plus media hits Mrs. Warning received with also her family after a post from a past board member. His calculations in dispute were wrong. It didn't figure out to be a 0.55, but it was higher, but it's higher to the PIAA standings. With that wrong statement, it brought people on his bandwagon to belittle her and her family for her statement as a chairperson. Again, due to lies by a few and followed by many, it started this disgraceful situation. But how dare people compare Gateway with Wilkinsburg, which is no more? By making that statement, or surrounding districts like that honor the PIAA rules, like Franklin, Norwin, Penn Trafford, Plum, I can go on. There's 26 of them in our surrounding areas. Are you showing them they're like Wilkinsburg too? I think the biggest problem is what mandated by the state. It lets Gateway and every other school graduate a student with a 1.0 or D average to graduate and get a diploma. With us going with the PIH standards, they are higher than a 1.0. So tell me how we are showing favoritism to the athletes by expecting them to achieve more. We expect that from our students by helping, counseling, and encouraging them to achieve their own level of learning and success to the best of their ability. I will always be fair. I will always help a student to succeed. I will always give a second chance, and I always look for the good in the kid and would rather see him in playing with a ball or a bat in their hands than running the streets. We have the ability to make or break a future. I say we strive to make it. Lastly, I know a few board members and citizens are opposed to me and Mrs. Warning for upholding the Gateway Pride. Unlike previous boards using a baby spoon to scrape the surface to find the truth in some answers, me and Miss Warning, for some reason, we came together. I thought she was, well, I didn't really know her at the beginning, but she speaks from her heart. If we have to, we'll come in using a backhoe if necessary. I got some statistics here, and these ain't athletes. Maybe 20% of them are athletes. Grade 10, the total number of students below a 2.0, 63. Grade 11, below 2.0 is 39. Grade 12, 44. A grand total of 156 students. Maybe 10% of them are athletes. The rest of them, I don't know what happened. But thank you for your time.
Did you say ninth grade?
Ninth grade, we didn't have ninth grade. Pardon me? 10th, 11th, and 12th, ma'am. I'm sorry. If you need it, I'll get it for you.
No, I have a ninth grader, so I was just curious.
Okay, thank you. That's all, Scotty.
All right, thank you, George. Okay, we're going to move on to action items since we have Brian that's on vacation. And we'll start with personnel action items. Ms. Crump?
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Due to the many items which we need to have approved prior to the start of school, we are recommending that personnel agenda be approved and its prior to school. Resolved that the Gateway Board of School Directors accepts and approves the personnel agenda items 1 through 5 as listed in Section D for the study session. Under resignations, we have 8 resignations listed. Leave of absences, 4. Transfers, we have 3 listed. We also want to congratulate Mr. Barlack. He has moved from the Mosside Middle School to Gateway High School. Under employment, we are hiring 2 special ed teachers. We're recommending Ms. Biscup and Ms. Peterson. They were long-term subs last year at the high school. Due to leave of absences and increasing enrollment, we have 4 one-year temporary positions that we are asking for approval for. Substitute food service workers, we have 2 names listed, and a school police officer. Under Section 5, we have supplemental contracts and also volunteers.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Rucci, second by Mr. McIntyre. Questions or comments on the agenda items? Seeing none, can we have a roll call?
Mrs. Cerrucci?
Aye.
Mr. Gottman?
Aye.
Dr. Kalkstein?
Abstain.
Mr. Lapsevich?
Aye.
Mr. McIntyre?
Aye.
Mr. Ritter?
Aye.
Mrs. Warning?
Aye.
Mr. Williams?
Aye.
Mr. Bova?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Section F, action items. Is that Mr. Schott?
Item number 1.
Thank you, Dr. Short. Number 1 is the collective bargaining agreement. Resolved that the Gateway Board of School Directors approves the collective bargaining agreement with the Gateway Education Association effective July 1st, 2018 through June 30th, 2020, subject to ratification by the Gateway Education Association. Item number 2, approve the Title I non-public school agreement with the Allegheny Intermediate Unit Number 3 for required remedial reading and math instructional services in the amount of $26,496, and for the required non-public Title I parent involvement services in the amount of $245 at the following schools during the 2018-2019 fiscal year, and as depicted in Exhibit A. Item number 3, approve the Title IIA non-public school agreement with Allegheny Intermediate Unit Number 3 for required non-public school professional development services in the amount of $12,047.11, and for a 3% administrative fee in the amount of $372.57 at the following school during the 2018-2019 fiscal year, and is depicted in Exhibit B. Item number 4, approve the following revised policies that were placed on public display beginning June 27, 2018. Policy number 246, school wellness, as depicted in Exhibit C, and policy number 004, local board procedures membership, as depicted in Exhibit D. Addition of the following language indicated in bold italics. Qualifications, item number 3, except as provided by law, he shall not be engaged in a business transaction with the school district, be employed by the school district, or receive pay for the services from the school district, or work on site for the school district for any subcontractor for the district.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or comments?
I have a question about item 4. I sent an email to the board that went into great detail about the trouble that I had with this language. I think Mr. Dice indicated that the original unaltered language was the clearest.
Meaning what's on the current resolution.
That's incorrect, but Mr. Dice is here, so he can correct me if I'm wrong. So, Mr. Dice, you said in your email, bring it up, I thought that the initial language was clear and unambiguous. It appears now there's an additional discussion by the board. So what did you mean when you said the initial language was clear and unambiguous?
Did you mean the language that's written here on the paper?
That's correct.
Yes.
All right, so I think it is not clear, and I think it is ambiguous, and I sent a long, rambling email to the board citing all of the areas that where I was able to explain. So let me just give you one. So if you're working on site for the school district and you're driving a bus, sometimes the bus is on site, sometimes it's not on site.
School bus is always considered on school property, correct?
Right.
If you're at an away football game, that's considered you're on site, correct?
All right. And what if
Bus
you...
is a bus. I think on-site is a building, so.
Okay.
I think that your points were all taken, John, and I think that the consensus didn't agree with you, and that you have
So
the
is that-
opportunity to vote no on this policy if you do not like the wording. That's my opinion. Anybody, it's a discussion, so anybody else can comment.
Did everyone receive my email?
I certainly did.
Did everyone receive my email?
Did everybody receive John's email?
I believe so.
No, I don't have a phone.
So George has to,
No, I didn't see it. My phone was broke. I don't have a computer. It
and
froze on
Jesse,
me.
did you receive my email?
I did, yes. No, I didn't. I said no.
No, he's
And
talking
Val?
to Jesse.
Oh.
Jesse.
And Val, did you receive my email?
I did, I read
Yes, they both have.
Okay, thank you. So now I can say, Mary Beth, that most of the board did receive the email so that they had time to consider my objections to this. So now I'm able to proceed. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, John.
Any other questions or comments?
I have a comment. On the one policy, I would just like to take a moment to address the issue of my prospective employment here as a substitute classroom aide through Kelly Services. This all began as a casual suggestion of our personnel director, who stated that it would be acceptable for me to do so. This issue has gotten out of hand and has become a distraction, something that I had no intentions of happening. My only intentions was to help children, as I very much enjoyed my 15 years as an employee here at Gateway. Many people, including board members, had childish reactions to my request. Again, it was never my intent to be a distraction and cause controversy. For this reason, I am withdrawing my request to work as a substitute aide at Gateway through Kelly Services. I intend, though, to substitute for other districts, as my intentions was and always has been to spend time with the students. Moving forward, I would like to remind my fellow board members and the public that it is our duty and our job to put the best people in all positions in the district. At times, this has meant allowing people with supposed connections to perform duties for us. For example, in the past, it was decided that it was in the best interest of the district and taxpayers to allow a past board member's business to provide services to the district. This is an example of people working together and leaving politics out of the picture to accomplish the greater good. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
I think that we can respectfully disagree on issues as a board and not take things personally. And I think that this, for me personally, this is not a personal issue against Val. It opened up a can of worms when this policy was written. We didn't have a lot of subcontractors in the school systems. Now we have potential to have subcontractors as substitutes, as aides, as our cafeteria workers, as our nurses, as our bus drivers. So as cost-saving measures for school districts continue to be investigated, there is more and more and more opportunities to have divisions outsourced or have contract employees in positions that, when this policy was written, were actually Gateway employees. So some people view, Mrs. Warning's application for the job as violating the intent of the law that says you cannot serve on a school board and be an employee of the district that you serve in. So I respect Val. I think she does have a true heart for children. I think even though she's withdrawing her personal application to be an aide, in my opinion, this policy should still go through because of all those numerous other opportunities for people to be employed as the district as a contractor. And for me personally, that violates the whole intention of the law that makes that a conflict of interest. Again, other people see that conflict as different. That's the way I see it, and I can respectfully disagree with my colleagues who may not agree with me on that.
Any other questions or comments? Bonnie, can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Gottman.
Hello?
Mr. Gottman.
Oh, aye.
Dr. Kalkstein.
Yes to 1 through 3, no on 4.
Mr. Lapsevich.
What's that?
Mr. Lapsevich.
Are you number 4?
No.
Yes on all and abstain for number 4.
Mr. McIntyre.
Aye.
Mr. Ritter.
Yes on the first 3, no on number 4.
Mrs. Warning.
I abstain from number 4 and yes on all the other.
Mr. Williams.
Aye.
Mr. Bova.
Aye.
Mrs. Cerrucci.
Aye.
Motion carries
For all 4 items?
all
Yeah,
4 items,
all
yes.
Number 4 had 6 approvals. Is that correct, Bonnie?
It has 5. We have 5 on number 4.
Motion carries on everything?
Yes, that's correct.
Before we move forward, Mr. Williams, I would like to acknowledge the vote by the board tonight.
Are these action items? Rick, is yours an action item?
Yes, sir.
He wants to comment on the passing of item 1 that we just passed.
Should we get that after we get Brian's votes?
Yeah, because we just want to get Brian off.
Okay.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
We can hold.
Great.
Where are we?
Read G then?
Section G. Are both of these action items?
I believe so.
Listen,
Everybody at section G?
what happened to the rest of that?
First one is to suspend board policy 1221.
Val, is that your resolution?
Yes. I am asking for approval to suspend board policy 1221, the athletic and extracurricular activities, to align with the other surrounding school districts.
Is there a second?
Second.
Questions or comments? Can we have a roll call?
Oh, wait. I have a question, comment.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, speak up, Brian.
Okay, all right, so this is for the GPA. I just want to throw my 2 cents in on this. I think we should keep our standards. When I was in school, my sister was in school, we were raised that academics come first. And Mr. LaBeouf, if he's still in attendance, he would know that my sister was an exceptional track athlete, and she did keep her grades up throughout the entire 4 years she was up at the high school. And outside of high school, I've always believed that whenever, if something goes wrong with athletics, like you get a career-ending injury or you become a bust, you have to rely on your college education, your high school education. And to lower the standards could potentially cause kids not want to follow through with that, and in turn jeopardize their future. So I just want to say that I'm in support of keeping our 2.0, and that's all I got. So if anyone else wants the floor, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Thanks, Brian.
I just have one other comment. Okay. PSBA, we reached out to PSBA, and their response was that our board policy 1221 is unique to our district and many other districts. They all decide to use the PIAA eligibility guidelines rather than having a separate policy. So that's just what PSBA had said. That's it.
Any other questions or comments?
Yes, I have a quick comment. I would like to see us follow a path that involves teachers and administrators to make more kids eligible and to have them succeed. I don't know what's magic about 2.0. Why not 2.5? If you can magically make kids accomplish things, why not 3.0? Moses didn't bring this number down. So I think this is something that needs more discussion. I'd like to see teachers involved. I'd like to see involved parents involved. We seem to be this all or nothing decision we're making, and I frankly just don't get it. This is a significant change to the fiber and fabric of Gateway, and I'm not sure what we're rushing into this for.
So it looks to me like we're at a crossroads here. We have two possible paths forward. We could go ahead and vote right now, or we could table it. Or what we could do is vote either this up or down and then decide later on, like a month from now, to come back with an updated policy and then vote that in. So this would turn out to be a bridge. So there are a couple different ways we could proceed if we're still uncomfortable. So the question for the board is, are you uncomfortable right now? Do you think we could do a better job with this? Like Jack said, I think we
yes.
do.
There's
So
actually another policy
there's
below
no-
that on the agenda that's up for consideration as well.
Okay, thank you.
So how do we get to your policy?
We have to vote on
But we have to vote on action item number 1 first.
Okay.
Is my-
Any
is
other
that correct,
questions or
Mr. President?
comments?
Is that correct?
Right. Seeing none, can we have a roll call?
Dr. Kalkstein.
With this voting,
Number 1.
Mr. Lapsevich.
yeah.
Mr. McIntyre.
No.
Mr. Ritter.
No?
Mrs. Warning.
Yes.
Mr. Williams.
Aye.
Mr. Bova.
No.
Mrs. Cerrucci.
No.
Mr. Gottman.
No.
Motion fails.
Motion fails. Okay, number 2.
All right, number 2, we've been discussing this all evening. And for quite some time with the athletic committee and the policy committee. It's something that's been brought up apparently for the last couple years. Apparently the only resolution that's come forward out of it was to suspend it altogether, which is something that I didn't feel comfortable doing. So I'm making a motion to revise the current policy. I believe, is the current policy above me right now? With the changes?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to try to be brief with this to make a proper explanation of it. The current policy, as it's stated, okay, is it shall be the policy of the board that students maintain a 2.0 or above cumulative grade point average, or a 2.0 or above grade point average for a previous 9-week grading period. And a very important word here is and. Maintain 2.0 or above grade point average at the midpoint of the next 9-week grading period, along with the weekly requirements established by the PIAA. Now, if you read that literally how it says, it does not allow for a student that is ineligible at the 9-week mark to become eligible at the 4.5-week mark. It allows for them to lose eligibility, but because of the word and there, which was a change from the former policy, which had an or there, meaning if you had the 9-week and you weren't there, you had to have the 9-week or the 4.5. Now it's and, so you have to have both. And it's been an item of debate and topic amongst this board, the previous board, and it left a lot of weird interpretations up in the air. So my goal with my rewrite of the policy was to make that more clear. And the way I would like to rephrase that paragraph, as it's shown above, is to be eligible for extracurricular activities, all students must, in addition to adhering to all PIAA qualifications, have a cumulative GPA of no less than 2.0, or have a GPA of no less than 2.0 at the end of the most recent of the following: the 9-week grading period, the 3-week GPA verification, and a 6-week GPA verification. So what this does is it gives every student the opportunity every 3 weeks of the school year to gain or lose eligibility. Every 3 weeks, there's going to be a GPA verification. And again, they'll be able to either move up or move down. In my opinion, I think it'll help it gives us more flags and more opportunities to see kids that are starting to slip and give them an opportunity to move back up. And it doesn't punish them by removing a whole 9-week chunk of eligibility, which in many cases is almost the entire season. Okay. At most, if we're looking at football, if it's a 3-week deal, odds are they're looking at probably losing 2 games. And then if they have to work to get back, and if they do the work, they regain eligibility.
In addition to that following paragraph.
Yeah. The current policy reads, official cumulative GPA check verifications will be calculated every 9 weeks. Students entering grades 7 through 12 who do not qualify in June will have a one-time right to an August recheck to include summer school participation for classes they are failing. Each student will have one opportunity during her enrollment to apply summer school grades to meet eligibility. After this single August recheck option is exhausted, eligibility will be determined by the 9-week GPA verifications as well as the 4.5-week midpoint verifications. Furthermore, students must maintain a weekly eligibility status as established by the PIAA. What that basically means is you get one chance to go to summer school and regain eligibility. I would like to eliminate that phrasing essentially altogether. I think it, in effect, it discourages kids from attending summer school. I think that's maybe not the intent of it when it was written, but I think that's an obvious repercussion of it, and I think we can do better. So my wording would be, official cumulative GPA checks verifications will be calculated every 9 weeks. Students entering grades 7 through 12 who do not qualify in June will have a right to an August recheck to include summer school participation to replace failing grades from the June report card. That gives a student athlete, student participant, a chance every year to take summer school classes to further their education and to regain their eligibility. Now, a paragraph I believe will stay, that I believe should stay, and it's something I think that has been talked about here several times, and it is current policy, is that ineligible students must attend the study sessions organized by the building principal and cooperate with all study sessions requirements in order to practice in sports and/or activities during the period of ineligibility. An ineligible student may not travel with the team or activity and may not wear the team activity garb. However, an ineligible student may sit on the bench during home games and events. So what this means is if you are ineligible, that just means you're not allowed to compete. You are still allowed to attend practice. You are still getting that daily structure. You're not technically out running the streets. You are still allowed to be a part of the team. You were not kicked off the team altogether. You were still allowed to participate. However, in order to do so, you must attend the required study sessions and be working towards getting your grades back up. In the current policy, students who do not have a GPA of 2.0 as outlined in this policy may not try out for teams or activities unless the ability to become eligible exists before the start of the season or activity. I didn't understand the intent of that. I don't know how many teams we actually do have cuts and tryouts and you know, making the team for. I think it's unnecessary language that maybe bogs things down a little bit, so I was moving to strike that. And then finally, any coach or sponsor who does not check eligibility and follow the procedure, the policy, will be removed from his or her coaching sponsoring position at the point of discovery.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second?
Questions or comments?
Question. Dr. Short, could you explain what you did at the policy meeting about the ninth grade, incoming ninth graders and the transition period, what your thoughts were about that?
Yes, when we had multiple policy committee meetings over the last 2 years, I believe. And one of the items that consistently came up, and Dr. Chakey referenced this with the ninth grade academy, that incoming freshmen, it has been established with data that there is a constant battle between the social-emotional issues of transitioning into a high school that is now comprehensive 9 through 12. For a lot of us, I believe, in this room, when we went to high school, the building was configured 10 to 12. And that is consistent with what you see in varsity interscholastic athletics, because it's very rare that you have a ninth grader perform at that level. A, because they're not physically mature enough to compete with 17 and 18-year-old students. One of the issues that we've been dealing with over the years is that transition from our 7-8 building into the high school, where we do have a rigorous curriculum, not that we don't have it at the middle school, but we have tiered classes, meaning in honors, in AP, and in academic track classes. Over the course of that first 9 weeks in the semester, we see a large number of students, somewhere around the 30 percentile level below a 2.0. A lot of kids who, coming from the middle school, maybe have had a 2.5 or a 3.0. It's an adjustment period, and I think everyone will agree with that data. And those with children understand the anxiety filled from going from one building to another. At the end of that ninth grade year, we examined data from the last 4 or 5 years, which had been consistent with the numbers represented probably around 80 plus students out of a graduating class of 300 below a 2.0. In some instances, we've had students below a 1.5 or a 1.0 that have been above a 2.0 in their middle school careers. That in itself makes that individual to become eligible extremely difficult to achieve that 2.0 over the next year or 2 years. And in some situations, students do, in fact, say, hey, look, I'm not even going to try to go off with this athletic team or this club or this band or musical group. It's not in their repertoire to even think about it. So we had talked about eliminating the GPA requirement for the ninth grade year, utilizing the PIAA policy for ninth grade, allowing them to transition, acclimation to the high school, then having our 2.0 policy kick into effect the way it was worded and written. That was one of the discussion focal points that came out of our policy committee meeting.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Yes, I just had a technical question. I can't find it, but you have a 3-week and a 6-week evaluation period. Don't those overlap? Aren't they mutually exclusive, or?
No, sir.
How does it work?
So when we sat down, I sat down with Rick and Dr. Short too, and said, you know, for me personally, I'm willing to look at this policy because
it does have some problems and some confusion. And I think most people agreed that having a kid have an opportunity to get back on the team sooner would be more motivating. To have a kid have to sit out for an entire season or miss 9 weeks doesn't motivate a child to do better. Because if the GPA falls below the 2.0 and they think, well, I'm out for the rest of the season, where's the motivation to get the grade up, right? Because ultimately our goal is to get the kid to succeed academically. So we said, how can we shorten the review time so that if a kid does the work, a student does the work, he goes through the effort, he brings his grade up, he should have an opportunity to get back on the team or the band or whatever extracurricular activity that was. And Dr. Short suggested 3-week intervals. So you have your start at your 9 weeks, you have 3 weeks, you have 6 weeks, and then you have the end of the grading period.
Those are points in time, interval points
Exactly.
in time,
So we're
not
giving
a
3-week
stretch.
intervals to allow a child to have a sooner opportunity to get his grades back up and be able to participate in that activity.
That makes sense.
In other words, John, if a student at the end of a 9-week grading period doesn't have the cumulative and doesn't have the 2.0 on that grading period, they have a chance at 3 weeks to get that grading period up to 2.0. If they still don't have it, they have another chance at the 6-week mark.
I like that. Okay.
To attain that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Val, I know we had discussed at length at some of the policy and committee meetings about the 9th grade thing. Would it be acceptable for you if we maybe amend this, just do all this right now? Because I know that's something we were looking at doing, was discussing, eliminating the standard for the 9th grade year and letting them adhere to the PIAA. Can we amend this current policy to only apply for grades 10 through 12? And do you think you would support that?
I didn't say anything, we were looking at the policy, but that's, a good thing to do.
Well, here's the deal. This policy is not getting passed or voted on tonight. It's getting voted on to put on public display to allow for additional comment for 30 days from the public. So one option is to go with the policy as Mr. McIntyre has presented it, or to amend it, or there's no reason that at a future board meeting somebody can't amend this policy again if it gets passed. What I would like to say is that since I have been elected to the Gateway School Board, it's been over 2 years, this policy has been a subject of discussion. It has been talked about rewriting. It has tried to been overwritten during sporting events, during inopportune times. And it has, personally, I have reiterated that we need to review the policy and do it correctly. And this is the first policy revision in 2 years that I have seen. And I think that Rick should be commended for his efforts at bringing something to the board that addresses the problems with the policy without lowering the standards, which is the overwhelming response that I receive from the community, is we do not want to lower our standards. So right now, I totally support putting this policy on display for public comment because I think it does those two things. It's a good compromise. It's a good start. I think going from our current policy to wiping it away to nothing or just the PIAA standards is too drastic. I think that if you have something that we can work with and we can make small baby steps and they can continue to be improved on and the public's feedback can be listened to.
So Mary Beth, this 30-day public comment period would be a great time for folks like Jim, who came up with the brilliant, 2.8 versus 2.9 instead of 2.0 versus 3.0. In other words, a different sliding scale could be considered. And the other one was some sort of instead of an eligible, put them on a gateway probation period, and then we get to invent what we mean by finding a way to drag those students, out of the pit that they're digging themselves into and get them, restored, like Rick is attempting to do here. So if there are any other brilliant ideas out there in the public, this would be a great 30-day period to do that, right?
I would add that I believe that anything that goes into policy that affects how we calculate GPA and would affect whether or not a student is eligible or ineligible at the beginning of the year, I think that sort of change is going to have to wait until the beginning of next year, because of the 30-day policy, the 30-day notice, we will not be able to implement that at the beginning of the school year this year. So I think that would be unfair to the student body on the whole to have the spring athletes
I disagree
have a
with you.
different standard
I
than
don't
the
agree.
fall.
I don't agree with that.
That would be up to Mr. President.
So, you know, I'm reading this, I've never been to a school board meeting before, so I figured, what the heck? I live here, right, might as well see what's going on.
Always welcome.
And there's just something that I don't understand, like, it was a lot of concentration on the athletics and who they can't play athletics, but if there's a student that's on student council and has a lower grade, are they no longer allowed to be on student council?
Right.
Can they no longer be a welcome to the freshman committee?
It's all
person?
extracurricular activities.
It's all extracurricular
Yeah,
activities.
that's how it's actually worded, is to be eligible for extracurricular activities, all students.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I
ma'am.
understood what I was hearing. Doesn't do much good to sit here and not know what's going on.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Scotty, Mr. President,
No,
Is it-
as is, we can amend later. As is written.
Okay.
Yeah, it's as is.
is it possible to vote on Mr. McIntyre's and call for a policy meeting next week?
Sorry?
We would be voting on Mr. McIntyre's recommendation. The resolution right now would go on for 30-day public display. During that time period, we can call a policy committee meeting.
Okay.
In the interim, our current policy would still be in effect until this one would be voted on or altered, amended, whatever.
Correct. Okay.
So the message is if you want the current policy to change, then I would suggest getting the ball rolling on something to be on display on public review, because you have 30 days to display a policy. Because without a change, we are still looking at policy 1221 as it stands today.
Everybody understands where we're at? Any other questions or comments? Bonnie, can we have a roll call?
Mr. Lapsevich,
Yes.
Mr. McIntyre,
Aye.
Mr. Ritter,
Aye.
Mrs. Warning,
Aye.
Mr. Williams,
Aye.
Mr. Bova,
Aye.
Mrs. Cerrucci,
Aye.
Mr. Gottman,
Aye.
Dr. Kalkstein.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Dr. Schur, could you please set a meeting date next week for a policy meeting at your discretion?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Gottman, I think that's it for the action items. If you want to continue on your vacation, you may do so.
All right, thank you for letting me call in for this, and I will see you guys and the rest of the community at our next meeting. Thank you.
Thank
Bye,
you.
Brian.
Section B, bills and financial reports, Mr. Schott.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. This evening, we're presenting the financial reports, specifically consisting of Section B1 list of bills for the months of July and August 2018, and Section B2, the monthly financial statements for the months of June and July of 2018.
Questions, comments?
You want a motion?
No,
So
we are
moved.
voting on this already.
Was that a motion?
Yeah, that was a motion. You want to second that,
Second.
John? Thank you.
What are we doing?
What are we voting on? We're not voting on anything.
A voting meeting.
Oh, we're not voting?
No.
Oh, sorry.
But this questions or comments. It's all just,
Sorry. I'm like, you're waiting for a motion, you're calling for discussion, I have a motion.
so what do we do with that? Do we rescind it? Okay.
Move it on.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Items previously tabled, we have the high school stadium scoreboard. Is there any motion to take that off the table?
I have a question about it. It's worded in a strange way right now. The original
Can't
motion-
discuss it unless you untable it.
We have to untable it to have a discussion. You can make a motion to untable, get a second.
Or do you just want to leave it tabled?
I think we need to leave it tabled because
Well, then there's no
people's
discussion.
confusion is, you know,
Okay, then there's no
status
discussion.
quo.
Correct.
Section C, Section D, personnel matters. Ms. Crump.
Approve that.
We did that.
Okay,
We're on section
section,
E. We're on section E.
Where are we?
Section E, conferences and
Is there any,
conventions.
Section E?
No E.
Nothing.
There is no E.
Oh, good.
This is great.
Section F, administrative resolutions. We're not voting on these this evening.
We did that. There
We
aren't
already
any.
voted.
No, the ones we're not voting
Oh,
on.
there's another section F. There's two section Fs.
Section F.
Okay.
Administrative resolution. So I'll defer to Dr. Rossi.
No, no, we have to do comments on non-agenda items. We have a couple people here who wish to speak.
Non-agenda items, okay. Doing the action items first.
That really threw me off.
That
I'm
threw
sorry.
everyone off.
Am I allowed to stay seated? Is that acceptable?
Before she starts talking, can I just ask a question? Mr. President, on Section F, the administrative resolution.
Yeah, there are some resolutions here we need
There
to
are.
go over.
There's two Section Fs.
Yes.
Yeah, but they're
Is
not,
that what we were
So we're
doing?
not
putting
action items.
You can ask questions then.
Yes.
the fee schedule on exhibit also?
That's where I was asking for Dr. Rossi to.
I thought you were doing board reports.
No.
Scotty, you do whatever you want. You're the president.
Hold on a minute, go ahead.
Dr. Rossi.
All right, Section F, number 1, fee schedule for facility rentals, administrative regulations, 707 R-2, Exhibit A. Number 2, we have facility agreements for the Gateway Midget Football and Cheerleading Association. Number 3 is final approval for grade 8 physical science, CK-12 textbook. Number 4, we have one student teacher from the IUP. Number 5, accept a donation from a vocabulary program for elementary school. Number 6, disposal of outdated textbooks and workbooks from various subjects and vendors. Number 7, approval of a la carte cafeteria price increases for the 18-19 fiscal year. 8 is a special education settlement agreement and release. Number 9 are educational service agreements as listed. Number 10 is appointment of the school safety and security coordinator. Is to approve the appointment of Dr. Dennis Chakey to serve as the district school safety and security coordinator and oversee the various safety-related requirements and deadlines as mandated in Act 44 of 2018. Number 11 is approval of the Title I federal funds regulations for 18-19 fiscal year.
Questions or comments on Section F?
I just want to comment, thank you, Dr. Chakey, for stepping up on the school safety.
Thank you. Okay, comments from residents on non-agenda items. And I have Rhonda and Minerva. Please state your name and address just for the record, please.
Minerva White, 517 Larix Road, Monroeville. So I'd like to just say before I begin my comments that my comments are, I'm hoping will be proactive. In other words, they're not on anything that's an agenda item or even in discussion. My name is Minerva White. I've been a tax-paying resident of Monroeville for 24 years. I'm the mother of 5 adult children, all whom matriculated through Gateway, and I will not brag on my children. If you have any questions, you could ask Dr. Short.
I could brag.
In addition, I have worked as a special education paraeducator for the last 14 years. For your personal information and for the public record, I would like to state the minimum qualifications for paraprofessionals. It requires a minimum of an associate's level degree, and you must have all your necessary clearances and complete 20 years of 20 years, ooh, that would be impossible, 20 hours of professional development every year. I myself have a bachelor's in English with a minor in Spanish from Colgate University. I am not alone. We have many highly qualified individuals, one who's even a former NASA engineer. How's that for intimidating? But those of us, but those are just the written specs. You have to be quick thinking, you have to be thick-skinned, you have to be flexible, patient, and adaptable, and that's just in a nutshell. As a paraeducator, I'm required to do whatever the student needs.
And some of our students have extensive needs, toileting needs, things that the nurses will not do. It falls to us. Some of our students require assistance with mealtime. That can include feeding, meal preparation, opening packages, containers, and monitoring general lunchroom behavior. But most of their needs are instructional and behavioral. This requires me to be adept at teaching social skills, not just etiquette, but modeling conversation loops so that they can create friendships, teaching them to read body cues so that they can be aware when someone is not interested in what they're talking about, and things of that nature. I also assist with managing behavior. This can include the rehearsal of rules, helping a student become calm after stressful events, and there are other things that fall under that category. And of course, I am responsible for providing academic remediation in the special education classroom and support in other settings, including PE and other specials. I also perform what I call administrative duties, such as classroom setup, preparation of materials, and collection and graphing of data for IEP purposes. All of these things exponentially increase the teacher's ability to spend maximum time with each student. Even with that, the teachers are stretched very thin. So allow me to speak in specifics for a minute. I work at the Gateway Middle School, that's a 7-8 building, where we have 9 periods a day. Subtract from that lunch and 2 teaching preps, during which the students travel to specials. That leaves only 6 periods. 6 periods to teach math, reading, language, science, social studies, social skills, manage behavior, and fill other gaps, usually through intensive teaching. In our classroom, there are a variety of academic levels. The teacher has to determine how to place the students in smaller groups in order to meet their specific needs per IEP goals. So even with 2 periods for basics, math, reading, and language, that's only 86 minutes, which is then further divided when you split those kids into their differentiated groups. Unfortunately, that means that those kids get precious little time with the actual teacher. Sometimes students have to be placed in groups where they don't even really belong because the teacher doesn't have the ability to work one-on-one with an individual student. So let's say, for argument's sake, we have 3 math groupings. That translates to 29 minutes, which is significantly less than typical students receive. And it doesn't take into consideration all the times that the teacher has to address behavior or is pulled out for trainings and meetings, or for roster students that are not even in her classroom. So think of what we provide in high school, Dr. Short, when we came up with the whole tag classes. When a kid was having a problem, we doubled the periods, right? We took away electives because we wanted that child to succeed. Well, a special education student doesn't even receive that benefit. So this is where good paraeducators are worth their weight in gold, because we're able to come behind the teacher and double or even triple the exposure that a student has to the material. Every time you cut a paraeducator's job, you exponentially decrease a student's ability to learn. The teachers can only do so much. When you cut a para job, you not only decrease that student's exposure to the curriculum, but keep in mind that most paras work with multiple students. I, for instance, had 7 students that I work with. This year, I'm supposed to work with 10. So you affect dozens of students. All of that qualifies me to work 3.75 hours a day for less than a secretary and a custodian. And I'm not making that comparison to in any way be disparaging towards those professions, but to highlight the underappreciation of a key component of our district's assets. We've heard rumors of being described by board members as bored housewives, or worse yet, glorified babysitters, which is offensive to paraeducators and to the students that we serve and to the parents who entrust their students to us. I understand that we have budgetary constraints. My taxes are also going up. And I understand that when you look at the sheer number of paraprofessionals, it's easy to want to find the way to cut that job. But I encourage you to keep in mind that the number is so high because the vast majority of paraprofessionals work part-time. So when you see the number 88, that's 44 positions. And that's 44 positions to meet the need of 533 students. If you looked at the janitors or the custodians, for instance, they have 44 full-time jobs, but if they work part-time, that would be 88. So I think that we're on par with some of the other jobs that are necessary in the district. And can I say of Kelly Services that the people that we get from there are not permitted to interact with the students to the full extent that we are. So again, that students' needs are not being met. They have no firsthand knowledge of the particulars involving the students' needs, their behavior plans, and they do not know how to remediate across the curriculum. So every time we have a Kelly person in our room, that teacher is spending more time helping that Kelly service person than the students that are in her class. 5 minutes is not enough to describe everything that we do. We have invited school board members and assistant superintendents into our classrooms in the past, and I do want to be, again, proactive. Our contract will be renegotiated next year. I invite you to come in and see what we do, see how vital we are to the classroom, and what a benefit we are to our student body. Thank you for your time and your attention.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Rhonda Wilson. I live at 112 Shangri-La Drive, and I'm also a graduate of Gateway. 2 of my adult children went to Gateway. I've worked for the district as a paraprofessional for the last 11 years. To piggyback on what Mrs. White said, I'm going to give you a little more insight into our daily job. The children who I serve have varying aspects of autism spectrum disorder. For anyone who doesn't know what that is, it can be the most gifted student in the world, but they have a problem being socially accepted, or it can be a student that does not know how to use the bathroom as an adult, cannot speak, cannot function in a room where there's any noise or where the lights are too bright. It's so varied. In order to work with these students, we have to be highly skilled in the following areas: direct instruction, and please stop me if you need explanation for what any of these are: intensive teaching, behavior management, sign language, and instructional remediation. In addition, we must be able to foresee, observe, and document any and all behaviors by antecedent behavior and consequence as they occur. We must implement behavior management strategies and techniques. We must keep ourselves, co-workers, and other students safe when aggressive behavior associated with ASD occurs. We must execute the student's IEP not only within the school, but in vocational programs and field trips, transition the student to other areas of school safely, and provide assistance with hygiene. We provide test and homework support to those students who are in inclusion classes and work with the classroom teachers to ensure that the student is on task throughout their lessons. We must implement, remediate, and shape vocalizations as directed by the speech therapist. We work with the students so that they learn valuable life skills such as making a bed, cooking, doing laundry, cleaning a table, etc. We have implemented feeding programs and hygiene programs. We're responsible for creating materials as determined by the classroom teacher, preparation of reinforcement necessary for compliance. We also have to complete 20 hours annually of staff development/training. Twice each year, we are assessed by the state of Pennsylvania through the Pennsylvania Autism Initiative to make sure that our classroom is meeting the state standards and best practices. I don't know of any other department in the district that is assessed twice annually, and if there is, please correct me. Additionally, we're required to graph our students' day, including behaviors and their daily tasks, to monitor the students' progress and success. We also document through Access, a Medicare reimbursement program from which the district receives reimbursement, the time we are observing, redirecting, and assisting our students. We must, at any moment, be prepared to change direction and work with a different student. When our classroom teacher is out, we continue the flow of the class without missing a beat, since 9 times out of 10, the substitute or the fill-in teachers are completely unfamiliar with how our classroom operates. I want to share with you one of my favorite quotes from Helen Keller, who we all know has a disability but has made a huge impact. Ms. Keller says, "The best educated human being is the one who understands the most about the life in which he or she is placed." I believe that our job is to prepare, educate, and train our students to achieve the maximum independence and functionality possible despite their disabilities. I believe that no limits should be placed upon these bright, caring, amazing young people. And it is our job to ensure that they leave us, Gateway School District, with the very best foundation for their future. Really is my hope that all of you have listened to this, and I'll be happy to print it out because I know it's quite a bit of information to take in, but I hope that it's provided you with insight to the value of a paraprofessional, and anyone that thinks that we just come to work because we're bored housewives. I work because I don't want to be a bored housewife, and I work because I see a student that only is saying 25 words. By the end of the school year, they're saying 53 words. I see a student who never interacted with another student in a phys ed class tossing a ball to a typical student and smiling about it.
Ma'am,
That's why I do this job.
I can't speak for it, all the other school boards, that the idea that school board members described paras that way, I find that astonishing.
I've never heard anybody.
We also found it quite astonishing and quite insulting.
And personally, my mother is a retired special ed teacher's aide from Woodland Hills. She worked there for 20, 25 years. I know firsthand the difficulties involved with those positions.
I think that one of the biggest difficulties is that many people don't realize a disability and what it is. I mean, we had a young man speak tonight who's dyslexic. I have students, and Dr. Short will attest to this, that outside of the school, I still keep in touch with. I have a student right now who's in Hong Kong, and he is at a medical program, and he still keeps in touch. He wrote his entrance paper to Johns Hopkins when he was here before he went back to Hong Kong about me and saying how I changed his life and how I shielded him from the acid raindrops of the bullies of society. So that's why I do this job, to make a difference in the life of these students. Whether some of them have the mental capacity to know that I'm making a difference, their parents know, and I can see the difference, and God sees it, and that's why I'm there. Thank you all.
Thank you.
I just want to make a quick comment to you four here. I commend you. I know what it's like to be in your shoes, the difference that makes helping a child. So I want to do it again. So thank you for what you do.
The reports. Heather? Dr. Chaky, Dr. Rossi, Scrump, Schott, Mr. Duck, Mr. Short.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. With the passing of the collective bargaining agreement, I would like to issue a statement that was prepared on behalf of both Mr. Mark Spinola, the GEA president, and myself as superintendent of schools. We are very pleased that the diligence and commitment of both the Gateway Education Association and the Gateway School District have resulted in a collective bargaining agreement that will serve the interest of our teachers, our students, our schools, and our community through the 2019-20 school year. The district and teachers look forward to a seamless start to the 2018-19 school year on August 20th, when teachers report. Both sides advocated for a fair and equitable contract and are pleased that the association and school board were able to reach an agreement through a thoughtful and collaborative process that was respectful of all parties' interest. Mr. Carr, I will be available for some questions that I'm sure you will have afterwards or tomorrow morning, okay? Thank you.
Anything else, Bill?
That's all tonight.
Michael, you got anything? Bob Brown, we ready to open tomorrow?
Tomorrow?
I want to see if we're ready to open tomorrow. All right.
Mr. President, before you go further, could Dr. Chaky please explain, we had talked about this in executive session, about the elimination of the honors social studies and honors science at Gateway Middle School?
Sure. We spoke about this. We see this as an opportunity to be able to extend some really academic, rigorous coursework to all of our students at Gateway Middle. I wouldn't think of this as an elimination of anything. I would think of it as incorporating higher levels of academic rigor for all students.
Thank you.
Mr. Kelston, Dr. Kelston.
Yeah, real quick, just want to extend a special thanks to Rebecca Ruane for her many years of service as a teacher at the Gateway School District. I know her decision to resign was an extremely tough one for her, and I wish her nothing but the best of luck.
It's warning.
Real quick, good luck to all our fall extracurricular activity people out there and our athletes. I wish you the best of luck, and I'm glad that the negotiations has ended and everybody's ready for the start of school. That's it.
Thank you. Mr. Lapsovich.
Thank you. I'd like to thank Mr. Shaky, Dr. Rossi, Dr. Short for their summer work, getting the school ready for next week. And I also would like to thank Bob Brown and Dave Palanchak for the excellent supervision on the summer cleaning and the excellent work the maintenance department did this summer. Thank you.
Mr. Ritter,
Nothing at this time.
Mr. Bova,
Nothing, thank you.
Mr. McIntyre.
Just quickly want to extend a thank you to everybody in the community that has reached out and everybody on the board that reached out to me and my family upon the arrival of our son. He was born on the 27th.
We want the pictures.
Oh, there's plenty of pictures.
All right, next time.
They look like you.
But had a lot of people reach out and congratulate. Several board members stopped by the hospital even to see us, and a lot of people have sent gifts and everything. I just want to thank everybody for all the support. Mama and baby are doing well, and I can't believe we're starting all over again. Thank you.
Sarucci.
I have nothing, thank you.
I just like to thank everybody coming out tonight and sticking in the time. It was a long one tonight, but I think we proceeded in the right direction. And with that, I look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. We're adjourned.